The biggest surprise team from the NBA bubble and from this year's playoffs was definitely the Miami Heat. When talking about all the best teams in the league and the Eastern Conference, people would often bring up those teams' respective star players. You look at teams like Milwaukee, where everyone finds a way to talk about how dominant and unstoppable Giannis is. Even teams like Boston, with the emergence of Jason Tatum, everyone wanted to talk about, is he a top 10 player? Is he a top 15 player? Is he now a superstar? Then you had Brooklyn, who obviously with KD and Kyrie, who didn't get to show what they were about this year, they still got a lot of attention and people already had them pinned as the new favourites out east given their star power. You even look at teams like the Philadelphia 76ers, given the age profile and calibre of players of Simmons and Embiid, people often talked about those two as potential title contenders as well. But no one was putting Miami in that conversation before this year, and even before the bubble, very few people thought they were legit contenders. Now, things kind of changed after they wiped the floor with Indiana and after Milwaukee looked a little suspect against Orlando, which had people believing, given the matchup, the Heat could beat the Bucks. And after they took care of the Bucks with such ease, it had people believing they could go all the way to the finals. But even despite them being the best team in the playoffs, or second to the Lakers as the best team in the playoffs before the Celtics series, there was still a lot of question marks over whether they could beat the Celtics, with it being a pretty split decision. Now, I'm not going to say that's the wrong thing to say, because that series was incredibly close and could have gone either way, and I wasn't sure that the Heat would win. I thought they would win, but they weren't a sure pick for me. But when you look at everything they had done, and for them to still kind of be a split decision, despite wiping the floor with the Bucks and the Pacers and the Celtics struggling to beat the Raptors, you would have thought the Heat would have had more of a backing, but it just goes to show that they continued to be underdogs all the way through, and in particular against the Lakers, where no one really gave them a chance, and I think they would have been a genuine chance if they didn't lose Dragic and Bam Adebayo wasn't hurt for a significant period of time as well. But that's enough talk about last year. We're talking about next year, this year, which is now upon us now, and why I think the Heat are going to be even better. Now, before I even talk about that, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated. I'm trying to hit 20k as soon as possible, so subscribing to the channel really helps, and it would be greatly appreciated. Now, I think what is often forgotten about this Miami team, and to the bubble in general, because we haven't seen any situation like this, so we don't really know the circumstances, we don't really know what it brought out of people, but people often talk about how the Heat's culture and how all of those kind of things might have led to them being a better team in the bubble, how they just might have been on the right track, unlike a lot of other teams. But I think people miss a key detail. The bubble was about 4 months, 5 months. It was basically a whole off-season, pre-season, outside of when the NBA was before. And when you look at players that particularly thrived in the bubble, look no further than Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, who have both been praised for their work ethic and have both improved year on and month on for guys like Herro. And that 4 months off where they had a chance to train, they had a chance to work on their body, work on their shots, watch film, do all of those things, they were different players to what they were in the regular season. People were saying this as Tyler Herro doing all these things as a rookie, and I'm not trying to discredit him because he was amazing, but he was effectively closer to a second-year player than he was to a rookie, and the same can be said for Bam, who was effectively like a second-year starter as opposed to a first-year starter, which had a huge impact on the team, and just goes to show how much they could improve in the space of a few months. Who's to say they can't do the same going into next year? People always talk about Boston and how Tatum and Brown are going to lead them forward. Well, Bam's younger than Brown and Herro's younger than Tatum. And Adebayo was better than Brown and Tatum in the Celtics series, and Herro outplayed those guys in at least one of the games, which just tells me that Miami's young core is close to as good as any young core in the league. You then add Duncan Robinson, who's older, but he's not as experienced. So the experience that he gains will turn him into a better player. You can add him as a young kind of player. And then let's talk about the draft pick that they got this year in Precious Achiuwa. Now, people have compared him to Bam Adebayo, which I think they do to pretty much any kind of 5/4 who can defend multiple positions and has agility, strength, and athleticism, which just isn't the case. Bam's a rare talent. But if Precious can be in the same kind of category as Bam, if he can just show that versatility, he showed that he could stretch the floor a bit, which would be important as well. But if he can show that he can take assignments 3 through 5, guard 4s and 5s, play at the 4, maybe play small ball 5 when Bam's off the floor. If he can show he can do all these things, which he showed in college, then he's definitely going to get game time. They're missing Jay Crowder, who was a big loss. He was inconsistent from 3, and he was just kind of inconsistent in general after having a really hot stretch a minute after joining the Heat. But the last few games, the last few series, he was incredibly inconsistent. So if you can bring in someone like Precious, maybe he could get injected into the starting lineup as soon as 20 or 30 games into the season if he shows what everyone's talking about. And if you put him into a Heat culture, a Heat team that is so renowned for getting the best out of young players, who's to say they can't have another Tyler Herro, Kendrick Nunn on their hands? I wouldn't put it past them. But I think a player that would be more in line to start immediately would be Mo Harkless, who I think they brought in for a direct replacement for Jay Crowder. Now, Harkless isn't the same kind of shooter Crowder is, but in terms of percentages, they're not far off. Harkless just isn't a volume shooter and probably doesn't have the same kind of ability as Crowder, but I think you put him in the right system, which Miami definitely is, where they love to move the ball, they love to get good looks, and you tell him to shoot a few more threes a game. We're going to live with it if your percentage is like 34, if it's a bit below league average, as long as you're taking a few more, and if he shoots around 3 to 4.5 threes a game, and sure, it's below league average, you then get his defense, he's got a bit of playmaking, he's probably a bit more versatile on offense than Jay Crowder, and then defensively, I think he offers just as much. I think that's a pretty good direct replacement at a pretty good price as well. And another player they brought in with a similar kind of mindset, a defensive-minded guy who can shoot the ball better than Harkless and probably Crowder, is Avery Bradley, who I think was fantastic for the Lakers before the bubble. He was finally hitting his stride. He's taken a few years after his time in Boston. He's really struggled a bit, but he finally hit his stride in LA. About 15 games prior to the bubble, he was shooting like 40% from 3. He was their best perimeter defender. He often took their number one assignments on the perimeter. And to get him at under $6 million a year over 2 years, someone who can start from the get-go, someone who can come off the bench, all of these things Avery Bradley does, to get him at under $6 million a year over 2 years, it's just a steal, really, and it's a fantastic pickup for the Heat, where I think he's going to thrive even more than he has in past situations. And how could I forget the re-signing of the highest paid assistant coach in the league, the best 15th man in the league, Udonis Haslem, who continues his stay in Miami. And look, there's not too much to say, but Udonis is an underrated piece to the Miami puzzle. He's someone that talks to them in the locker room. He's someone that's still on the floor. I don't know why he's not an assistant coach at this point in time. Maybe it's got something to do with finances. Maybe he still thinks he can provide a couple of games, a couple of minutes a season if need be. But the reality is he's a good assistant coach, and I'm sure he's going to transition into coaching very soon. So to have him on the bench, have him as the 15th man, it's definitely as valuable as any 15th man in the league. One of the few signings that Miami have made over the last few years, one of the few things that they've done that's made me question things a bit is Myers Leonard and the price they paid for him, considering he did nothing but clap on the bench during the whole playoffs. But to sign him to such a big contract and to sign him for 2 years, I think it was, is very questionable. I mean, I'll have faith in the front office. Maybe they think they can strike a deal. Maybe they think he's going to come in use. Maybe they think if Bam Adebayo can start shooting the ball, they could move him to the 4 and have Leonard at the 5 and think that could work with Crowder going out. Maybe they go to a bigger lineup to negate teams like LA played with 2 bigs as we've seen. I'm not exactly sure. He's a solid player in the season, but again, during the playoffs, he didn't really do anything. So to give him so much money after struggling in the playoffs, it's questionable, but I have faith in the Heat. They've made a lot of right decisions, so I'm not going to completely go off on them for signing Myers Leonard to a big contract. But I think the main premise of this video is that the Heat are going to get better because you look at Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro, even guys like Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Precious Achiuwa, even Jimmy Butler's first year in the Heat, this is now coming into his second year. He's going to be more familiar. He's probably going to be even better. All of these players have reason to improve heading into next year, particularly Herro and Bam, who I don't think get talked about enough as a young duo. People always talk about the Browns and the Tatums and the Jokic's and the Murrays, but Bam and Herro have more finals experience than any of these duos. Herro went on a streak of like 20 games of over double digits in the playoffs. He's a scorer. He showed playmaking chops. He showed solid defense. Bam Adebayo was fantastic in the playoffs, one of the top 10 players in the entire playoffs, was amazing. If he can go into next year and turn into a top 15, top 10 player in the NBA, which I wouldn't put it past him, if he develops a bit more offensively and gets even stronger defensively, then I wouldn't put that past him. People don't talk about this young duo enough because Bam's 23, Herro's 20, I believe. That's younger than Brown and Tatum, like I've said, and they've proven that they can perform on the biggest stage and perform consistently. So why people don't put these guys in the same category as a lot of these other young duos, Simmons and Embiid, for example, I don't really know. But this is a duo that could get even better, and I expect to get even better and to make this Miami team even better. Does this mean I think they're going to win the championship? No, because clearly the NBA is not as simple as, oh, a team gets better and they go from a finals team to a championship team. There's a lot and I mean a lot of other things that go into the game of basketball that could result in them obviously not winning a championship. But just in essence, given their age profile, given the Heat culture, given everything we saw in the bubble, and given the time off now from the bubble to this year, I think this team's going to get even better. And I think we're not looking at a 6th seed or a 5th seed, whichever they ended up finishing as. We're looking at a team that was fantastic in the bubble and closer to a top 4, top 3 seed in the East heading into next year. That's why I think the Miami Heat have got even more dangerous. If you did enjoy the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Also, subbing to the channel, that would be much appreciated. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.